The wolf is widely recognized as one of the most hazardous predators on the planet due to their vicious and violent nature. Therefore, when a wolf stumbled upon a baby after a car accident, the father of the child immediately anticipated the worst. However, what unfolded next surprised him. Residing in a bustling city at the heart of Russia, Leona and Simon led exhilarating lives with jobs that were fast-paced and thrilling. It was through their professions that they crossed paths and developed an acquaintance. While Leona served as the brand ambassador for their mutual employer, Simon held a sales position. Fate brought them together when they accidentally ran into each other during a meeting, igniting an immediate spark between them. Enamored by Leona's stunning looks and laid-back demeanor, Simon was smitten. Meanwhile, Leona found herself drawn to Simon's rugged charm. They began meeting up frequently, and before they knew it, they were officially an item. Together, they proved to be a formidable force, excelling in the industry they were both part of. Simon and Leona truly embodied the concept of a power couple. They lived in a big, fancy house, drove luxury cars, and attended lavish, expensive parties. They really were living the high. But nothing could quite compare to the day that Leona found out she was pregnant. She and Simon had not particularly been trying to conceive. However, now that she was pregnant, they were both overjoyed. They would be able to bring a baby into their perfect world, and their family would be complete. But just as Leona and Simon were really getting excited about having a child and bringing their young one into their world, disaster struck. The business that they were both working for suddenly collapsed. It essentially ran out of money, which meant that all of the employees, including Simon and Leona, found themselves without a job, literally overnight. This was a devastating blow, and their balloon quite unexpectedly popped. It wasn't long until the couple was struggling financially. No longer could they attend the parties they once had or go to the places they used to. In fact, they had to sell their big house and move somewhere smaller outside of the city near the forest. It was a sad and terrible fall from grace, but nothing could be done about it. Leona and Simon just had to cope if they wanted their baby to have a chance of living a happy life. So they moved into a small remote house and made money by doing menial jobs in and around a nearby village. They didn't pay much, but they were honest and reliable and made them relatively happy. To save some pennies on food, Simon would go into the forest and hunt in order to eat. There were plenty of deer around, and the meat was nice and tasty and would last them up to a week. But one day he came across an animal that he wasn't expecting. A giant, angry, hungry-looking wolf. It seemed that the wolf had been hunting the same deer as Simon, but the sound of his gun shooting had scared him. The beast glared him through the trees, but instead of turning his gun on it, Simon did something unexpected. He offered the deer carcass to the wolf. It clearly needed it more than he did. The wolf sniffed the carcass and looked at Simon gratefully. Before dragging its meat off into the depths of the woods, Simon had been in the forest many times and had never seen the wolf before. It must have been a chance encounter, but it was one that he would remember for the rest of his life. He knew that they were apex predators and could quickly and easily kill any prey that they wanted to, but this unique and amazing-looking wolf had really impressed him. Just as Simon lost track of it, his phone started to ring. It was Leona. She had gone into labor. By the time Simon had rushed to the hospital, Leona had already given birth to a beautiful baby girl. Simon was in awe of this beautiful little human that they had created. He had never been happier, not even when they had been rich and living their amazing life. This little baby girl was his purpose in life now, and he, alongside Leona, would raise her properly. They named their little girl Maddie, and for the next few days, they tended to her every whim. They fed her, loved her, cared for her, and were the best parents that they could be. But as Simon was driving along one day with Maddie in her car seat next to him, something tragic happened. It was a stormy and windy day, and as Simon drove along, a tree fell right in front of the car. He had very little time to react, and he hit the trunk while driving pretty fast. The car flipped, and Simon banged his head on the window as it skidded to a halt. He blacked out. When he awoke, Simon was a little dazed and confused. Luckily, he had sustained no serious injuries, and he quickly looked across to Maddie to check she was okay as well. However, she wasn't there. Where was she? What had happened? While he had been unconscious, panicking, Simon climbed out of the wreckage and looked for his newborn baby, but there was no sign of her. Reaching for his phone, Simon called Leona and blurted out everything that had happened to his wife. She rushed out to meet him and helped him look for the baby, but still, no one could find Maddie. As authorities turned up on the scene, Simon refused to be treated by the paramedics. All that he cared about was finding his little girl. Where was Maddie? How could they not find her? She was still so young and defenseless and innocent, and it broke Simon and Leona's heart to think that she was out there somewhere. The police immediately started searching the area for the little girl, hunting high and low, but as night started to close in, it became clear that Maddie was nowhere to be found. Neither Simon nor Leona was going to accept that answer, and they searched through the night in the wind and rain and darkness. But the next morning brought some answers in a way that no one would have ever expected. Rather than searching the roads, Simon headed out into the woods near the spot the crash had happened. He searched the immediate area before moving further and further out, and as he searched in a particularly dense, but a forest, Simon spotted something. The blanket that Maddie had been wrapped in. He let out a panicked gasp. Why was it all the way out here, running over to it? He picked it up and held it against him. It was wet and dirty, but it was definitely Maddie's. That's when he heard a noise behind him. A crashing and swishing, as if a large animal were tracking or hunting him. Slowly turning around, Simon was face to face with a wolf, and not just any wolf. It was the same one that he had encountered a week before. His heart sank, but not because he was fearing for his life. The reason Simon felt so crestfallen was because the wolf had a scrap of Maddie's dress hanging from its mouth. Had this hungry wolf actually eaten the baby? He couldn't bear thinking about it, but the wolf turned away and slowly walked off. Looking back as if telling Simon to follow him, Simon walked after it, afraid of what he was going to find. Once more, those thoughts of wolves being apex predators popped into his head, and he held back tears as he followed the giant animal. But as he rounded a big tree and looked into a small opening, Simon fell to his knees, because there laying in the open was Maddie. She cooed and made small noises as she laid there, her clothes damp, torn, and dirty. Simon ran up to Maddie and scooped her up, tightly embracing her and crying. He couldn't believe she was alive, but why was she all the way out there in the forest? Well, what he didn't know was that the wolf had seen the crash and done the unthinkable. It had plucked the baby from its seat, carrying it to safety. Perhaps it was the wolf's innate parental instincts that drove it to safeguard the helpless child, ultimately preserving her life. As Simon gazed at the wolf, it lowered its head in what appeared to be a display of gratitude. While Simon couldn't be certain, he couldn't help but wonder if the previously famished wolf was somehow expressing its appreciation for the meal he had provided when it was in dire need. With that, Simon departed from the woods and made his way back to Leona. In a hushed tone, Simon uttered his gratitude to the wolf, fully aware that he could never truly reciprocate its selfless deed. Nonetheless, he vowed to forever cherish and remember this extraordinary act of kindness. How did you feel about this remarkable story? Was it the first time you heard of a wolf displaying maternal instincts and taking care of a child in such a way? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.